Hello everyone, this is my fourth attempt at this, so you're getting a really brief version before I go into my other job here at Padron's Pizza, also why I've got the hat. However, I still really want to get this information to you, so I'm going to go through the PowerPoint here relatively quickly. I'm going to pause to let the dog out. Sorry about that. So I'm starting on slide 8, slides 1 through 7 you can get on your own. But mostly I want to talk about this essential question taxonomy. That's the bulk of what this chapter is dealing with. And the idea is that you model to students and teach students how to ask questions about what they're reading, specifically in your content, so that they become naturally curious about your content. Because when kids have a natural curiosity, they tend to retain the information more than they do than if they're just reading to find an answer. And I'm sure if you think back to your own experiences reading, when a teacher gave you a worksheet, you really just skimmed the chapter to find the answers to that worksheet, and you probably didn't retain a whole lot of information that you read. So that brings up this idea that if kids are asking questions about what they read, and not just like, where's the answer to this, but real questions that matter to them, like, why am I reading this? Why should I care about this at all? How is this going to help me in my own life? If they're asking those essential kinds of questions, they'll probably retain the information a little bit more. So if you're looking at slide 8, it talks about what essential questions look like. What are their characteristics? And they tend to elicit complex answers, and lots of times um, don't end a conversation. Like once you find the answer to the question, it's not like, oh, then it's over. They tend to lead to more questions. So I think about this when I'm watching the news. And thinking about it around this coronavirus, if I'm listening to the news or reading the news in the newspaper, those questions that I have tend to lead to more questions like, what is this virus? Why is it so deadly? Why are the masks so important? And why only certain types of masks? It's so small that it can fit through the holes and it can do this, but what about this? And I'm hearing that if you drink warm water, it'll kill it if it's still in your throat because it doesn't like the heat, but what makes it that the heat doesn't like it? And so I find myself just asking more and more questions because I have a natural curiosity because this matters to me. It matters to my family. It matters to the world. And that's kind of how I'm looking at these is taking something that I normally wouldn't have much interest in. I'm not really a virus kind of a person. Like I don't naturally question that. But when I think about it in my world and like how does this pertain to me? How does this affect me? Which is a really egocentric kind of way to look at it. But when we're trying to make students question our content, having them look at it from that egocentric perspective, that how does it affect me question, can be really valuable. I'm going to move on to slide 9 here. Um, so how do we get students to wonder? How do we create that natural curiosity? Because lots of times they're going to come in and not have it. Especially the older students, they figured out what they're good at and they've been told what they're not good at. So if a student has figured out that they're not good at science or not good at math, they're probably not going to come into your classroom with that natural wonder. So these are some steps on slide 9 of how to help create that. So, and lots of these we've already talked about. So using front loading, reminding students what they already know can sometimes help create that natural curiosity. So somebody telling me, well, what do you already know about viruses? Well, I know that they make you sick, and I know that viruses don't respond well to antibiotics, but bacterial infections do. So I know a little bit. So then it makes me start to question, well, why don't viruses respond to antibiotics? So that front loading helps start that process of creating questions in a student's mind. Um, have them ask what they still want to know about the topic. In the text, it had a teacher saying that they would ask students, what do you still want to know? And a typical answer for students would be, well, nothing. And so the teacher would then prompt them, well, what would someone else want to know? And I would go further and say, um, give them perspectives to ask questions from. What would your little brother want to know? How would this affect your little brother? Or how would a historian want to think about this? What else would a historian want to know about these bones that were found? Or, what would a scientist want to know about this virus? And why would they want to know that? And maybe giving them a different perspective to look at if their own doesn't generate those questions, because it may not. We've already done work with the anticipation or prediction guides to help get them questioning. That's those KWL charts, um, asking them what they already know and then later asking them to fill out what they learned. Those are great ways to get students to begin asking essential questions. So slide 10 shows the actual self-questioning taxonomy. And depending on what you've learned in your educational psychology classes, this might look really familiar to like a Bloom's taxonomy and how people learn. There are 6 steps here: remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. And I'm going to go over each one of those in detail and try and give you some examples of what you could do to help in assignment 10. Assignment 10, you have to create 6 stations in your classroom to help teach the text that you have chosen. So moving on to slide 11, if we look at remembering, one of the things to remember about this whole taxonomy is it's designed to help students remember or focus around 1 to 3 big ideas. This is not a way to get students to remember small details. It's all about the 2-3 big ideas in that text that you've chosen. So thinking about remembering, it helps students recall specific details, information, and ideas from the text. And again, this is probably around those 1, 2, or 3 big ideas. It has a student asking the question, what do I need to remember to make sense of this text? So, and it uses the comprehension skill of determining importance. So when you're thinking about the activity station that you might do to help solidify this particular piece of the taxonomy, the remembering, ask yourself, what are the key details that I want my students to remember about this text? And not that you're leading them to it. Sorry, the cat's going to get in the way here. But what do they need to remember to make sense of the text as a whole? So if I'm thinking about some of the things that some of you are doing, someone is doing the Magic School Bus, and I think once it was the ocean and now it's the planets. What do they need to remember from that Magic School Bus episode to make sense of everything that they're talking about? Do they need to remember that there are this many planets? Do they need to remember that our solar system is called the Milky Way? You know, what are the big ideas that they're going to need to take away from this particular text? Okay, moving on, slide 12. Understanding is the next one. It helps students understand what the author is telling them, and it would have students asking, what does this author want me to understand? And it uses the comprehension process of determining importance, inferring, and creating mental images. That creating mental images is really important because getting kids to understand in the younger grades that creating mental images would be really helpful. So your station could include having them draw what they understand the text to mean, but not just drawing the scenes, drawing what it means to them. So for example, if I'm thinking about Ashley, I think you're using the Martin Luther King's, the big words. What would they draw? And you've already kind of done some of these things with the hearts that you had, but what would they draw about what this text means to them and what the author wants them to understand? So if your text is about these big words and how words impact us, what could they draw that would show they understand that words impact us? Or change us. So maybe having them draw a person before something is said to them and after something is said to them. Or maybe the cycle of how words change and add us. And they could give examples of specific words. Moving on to 13, applying. This helps students use their understanding in a meaningful way. And it would have students asking, how can I connect with what the author is telling me to understand something else? So it's, I understand this, but how is this going to help me in this area? So this is helping them make connections to their own lives, to other pieces. Sorry if you can hear the cat purring. I'm sorry, she's the loudest purr ever. So a station for this might be, if I think about Jackie's text, the how to fill your bucket. So how can knowing that words impact people, or knowing that we can help people feel better, how is that going to help them understand something else? Like when somebody is depressed, or when somebody is upset or grieving, how can they apply what they learned in this text to that real life situation? And maybe asking them to apply this and say, okay, so here's what we read in the book. Here are the ways that they filled the bucket here. But what can you really do in your own life? Who could you impact? Maybe having them create a list of people whose buckets they want to fill, and giving specific examples of how they would fill that person's bucket, because everyone's bucket gets filled differently. So that is absolutely applying what they learned here to specific people in their lives. And you could create a worksheet that gives them specific people: mom, dad, a policeman, the school nurse, the principal, your teacher, a friend whose dog died, something. You could give them those examples, and then they could apply what they've learned in those situations. I'm so sorry, the cat is being really annoying, so I'm just going to try and pet her so that we can keep moving on. Next slide, slide 14. Analyzing. It helps the students explore deeper relationships, and it has them asking, how is this similar to or different from what I've read before? So again, the KWL charts here work really well. I think Allison did a really good job with her graphic organizer, where she wrote specific sentences and had the students put true or false next to those sentences before they read. And then after they read, they would come back and look at those sentences again to see if anything that they read is different from what they understood before. So again, having students fill out your graphic organizers and analyzing the information. Some of your graphic organizers would work here. Some of them would not. Some of them were just organizing information and not analyzing information. So some of you, your station for this could be just having them filling out the graphic organizer that you've already created. Some of you are going to have to create something here because your graphic organizer wasn't actually analyzing. Hold on, the dog wants it. Okay, I'm going to move on. Evaluating. This helps students critically examine the author's message and asking, what perspective or authority does this author bring to what they're telling me? So this is having the students, and again, critically look at the message in the text. Does this fit with what I've learned before? Does this fit with other people's coverage of the topic? So if I go back to Jackie's text, on how to fill your bucket, having them evaluate, does this match what you've been told before about how you can impact people's lives, or that words matter, or that we can impact each other? Does that fit? Does it fit with your own life? Do other people help you fill your bucket and make you feel better? So having them evaluate that. At the lower levels, it could be answering some pretty simple questions and having students give you some examples of how they know this is true or how it's not true. At the higher levels, this evaluation could be having students look up other articles on the same topic, and does it match? I know when I'm teaching credible sources in the 8th grade level, one of the things that I will do, oh my gosh, my animals are making this next to impossible, is I would have students look up something about Martin Luther King. One of the first websites that comes up is one that's created by his wife, Coretta Scott King. And then 2 or 3 down from that one, there's a really, it looks really good, but it's one that's made by a white supremacy group. And clearly those are going to bring 2 different perspectives. And clearly his wife has an authority to speak about him, but not so much this white supremacy group. Their authority is very different and very slanted and very negative. And so having students evaluate those sources for what the author is bringing is really important in determining whose voice do I want to listen to. So having students compare those 2 things and saying and figuring out who has the most authority and why could be really helpful in the upper grades. So creating, this is like the highest level in this taxonomy, and it is also like the highest level of understanding and comprehending that you can assess for students. So it helps them create new knowledge. How can I use this thing that I just learned to create something totally new and different. So how has the author changed what I understand? Um, so it uses the comprehension skills of synthesizing and creating mental images. So this is what can they do with the information that they've learned to create something totally new and different. So again, thinking back to Jackie's How to Fill Your Bucket, and Jackie, I'm sorry if I'm going to take some ideas that you might want to use in your stations, but how can I take this new knowledge of knowing that my life impacts others and that I can help people feel better? How can I take that and create something new? Um, can we implement something in the school where we try to fill each other's buckets? Can we create a new program in our classroom? Is there something that we can do? And ask the students, what can we do to implement this in our classroom, in our school? And they'll come up with really good ideas of how to fill each other's buckets. That's their knowledge. They're going to take what they learned here and apply it somewhere else. So thinking about someone who was doing the solar system. Okay, so they learned from the Magic School Bus about the planets and about this, but now how can they create something new? Have them go to their own backyard. What from the solar system can they identify? Can you help them figure it out that if they looked west and maybe Google Earth where their house is and what direction west would be if they were standing on their back porch, and having them create new knowledge that way. In the upper levels, these are science fair projects. These are debate topics. These are so if I'm thinking about metamorphic rocks, I know, Allison, you're doing metamorphic rocks and things like that. What can they create? Um, with this new knowledge? Is there something about that rock cycle that they can do in their own neighborhood that would impact anything? I don't know enough about rocks to be able to help you create a station, um, but is there something, can they do some kind of a collection and it does this, or I have no idea. Math people creating, is there some kind of formula that they can create that will help them build something? So it is actually the creation of a new product using the math skills or the physics skills that they've learned in your classroom. What can they create? I know our physics teacher had students create catapults, and then they would go out and use them. So using the things that they learned in physics class, they would actually go and create something. Um, so I'm on the last slide here. This taxonomy is designed for students to use to self-monitor, but until they've been taught this taxonomy and taught strategies, they're not going to be able to use it to self-monitor. You will need to monitor this. For the sake of assignment 10, where you have to create 6 activity centers around one around each of these ideas, we can make the assumption that you would be with the students in each of those stations. That's not true in a classroom. It might be you and a helper, so you might be able to cover 2 out of the 6. But for the sake of this assignment, and because we haven't taught our students how to do this, I will make and allow the assumption that you are at each station and you can monitor these. When you're doing your assignment, what I want is any worksheets or anything that you create for the activity center. I want to see that. That needs to be submitted. I want a brief paragraph describing what you expect students to do and the directions of that station itself, and what you will do and what the students will do. I also want the 3 takeaways that you are hoping for from each activity center. So if I'm doing remembering, what are the 3 things you hope students will take away from that? If you're doing the creating, what are 3 things you would like to see students create? Obviously, you can't tell me specifically, but I want you to say, I hope they use this formula to create something that does this. Or I hope they use what they know about metamorphic rocks to create something that. And give me some ideas of what you hope. It may not be what actually is created if you use those stations, but that's the hope. I'm going to end this. I'm going to try and upload it. This is going to be try number 4 or 5. I can't even remember anymore. I hope it works. I hope you are all well. If you have any questions, email me, let me know. I will try and get assignment 9 graded tonight so that you have that back before assignment 10 is due. Again, I hope all is well. Miss seeing your faces. Take care.